Hello, boys and girls. This is Digging Deeper with Mr. Matt, and we're going to be going back into the Bible lesson a bit that we learned about Job last week on how you can learn to be thankful in hard times. And particularly, we learned that Job learned to be thankful in suffering. In fact, there's a Bible verse we're going to talk about briefly today from the book of Romans, and it says in chapter 8, verse 28, "And we know that all things work together for good to them that love God, to them who are called according to his purpose." And what that verse means in the Bible is that even if we don't always understand why we're going through hard times, we can be thankful because God is going to do something good with that. Whether if we figure it out or not, God is going to do something much better than we could ever think or imagine because God is in control and God is good. Now, as we saw in the life of Job, Job didn't necessarily find out why all these bad things happened to him. They were out of his control, but he learned to be thankful. But there's another man in the Bible, in fact, a very young man named Joseph, who also went through some very hard times, and he did eventually find out why God allowed that to happen. See, I won't spoil the story for you if you don't know about it, but Joseph had many brothers, and he was the favorite child of his father Jacob. And so his brothers were jealous with him, and they did something bad to him. They actually sold him away to another country to get rid of him. And then they told his father Jacob that he had died. And we'll talk more about that later. But Joseph went through some really hard times when he was sold away, but eventually God turned the whole situation around, and he used this for good. In fact, God actually used this to not only save Joseph's life from something else, but he saved his entire family, and I would encourage you to go and learn about that story. But when we talk about how God makes things work together for good for those whom he loves, Joseph, later in life, after all the suffering he went through, speaking to his brothers who caused all that suffering for him, he said, and this is Genesis chapter 50, verse 20, "But as for you, ye thought evil against me, but God meant it unto good, to bring to pass, as it is this day, to save much people alive." You see, Joseph, when he went through his struggles, he didn't understand why all this was happening. But after it all had happened, he saw how God used it to save his family. And he was later reconciled to his brothers, like we read there. God takes everything bad in our lives and does something beautiful with it. He does something that either we'll have the privilege of finding out like Joseph did later in life, or even if we don't understand why certain things had to happen to us, when we're in heaven one day, we'll see what God did with it. And so we can be thankful, whether if we find out why here on earth or not, we can be thankful to God, even in suffering, because we know he is doing something very good with it.